look at what Pharaoh says. Oh, is that so? I won't listen to him. But Aaron and Moses persisted. The God of the Hebrews has met with us, they declared. So let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness so we can offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. If we don't, he will kill us with the plague or with the sword. Pharaoh replied, Moses and Aaron, why are you distracting the people from their task? Get back to work. You see, he doesn't address it at a spiritual level. He addresses it at the level of the power. He says, you are disrupting the economy here. Go and work. Stop this thing of yours of God, blah, 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 blah. I'm sure you've experienced that. Where the conditions don't respond at the level of your spiritual engagement. They respond at the level of this here. Now, don't make the mistake of coming down to engage here. Engage there. Can I repeat that? Don't make the mistake of wanting to engage where? Here. Engage where? There. Because when you want to engage at the level of Pharaoh, he'll dribble you. Indeed, Moses had no answer at this level. Because if he were talking to Pharaoh at this level, he would probably agree with Pharaoh that I'm about to take these people, they must go and worship, not work here. But he insisted on talking at this level. You have to remain addressing your issues and your mission at a spiritual level. That's discipline and faith. And the biggest problem that people have is they don't believe in that. It's not practical. Try being practical where you are not qualified to talk practically. Try that. So your credentials are key to your positioning when you introduce yourself in a new environment where you have to compete to influence people. Your credentials are very important. We are trying to influence people. Saints, whether you are in ministry, can I tell you, even in ministry, where you are trying to influence people, your credentials are critical. Who are you? Who has sent you? And who is behind you? Try it. If you think that even in ministry it's going to happen, you say, no, I am a prophet, anointed of God. And you go and try to speak to people and say, I've come, I'm a prophet. They say, we've seen them. There are many snake oil salesmen here. So now what's different about you? And then you say, God has not called me. God has called you. But the environment, you have to fight because it's about influence and credibility. So you don't fight at the level of the response, of the question from the people. You remain on cue with God and say, Father, you did tell me that their hearts will be hard, but I believe you control the environment and everything. I will remain a prophet anointed by you. Continue to work through me and show who you are here and do the work. You may start with 2 people. If 2 people receive God, that's 2 people who did not believe God yesterday. And the next time there'll be 4 people. You continue. Before you know it, the whole village knows that there's somebody anointed of God who's doing godly things. That's how it works. Okay. So those credentials are very important. Now, to quickly get to the other points so that we finish this today. I can tell you, God knows the beginning or the end from the beginning. He knows it. Don't ever doubt that. God knew that the children of Israel are getting out. Even if Pharaoh pretended, even if Pharaoh tried to be stubborn and Moses and Aaron get there and things are not working out, he knew that they are getting out. He knows what? The end from the beginning. And he says as much in Jeremiah chapter 28, verse 11. You guys know this thing here. And it says that I may have just misplaced my verse here, 29. For I know the plans I have for you, There are plans for good and for not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. And in those days when you pray, I will listen. So God knows the end from the beginning. When He tells you that, you must believe it. When He tells you who you're going to be, you must believe it. And walk through. Now the other thing is this. When we read in Exodus chapter 5, verse 13 to 23, so Moses goes and they introduce themselves, and look at what happens in Exodus chapter 13. 5 verse 13 to 23. Meanwhile, the Egyptian slave drivers continued to push hard. Meet your daily quota of bricks. You remember after Moses and Aaron tell them that God says you must go, and Pharaoh says go away. You know what Pharaoh did? He tells his people, go and make sure that people work very hard and actually make it worse. Don't supply them with the material. Now they must go and look for the material and come. No, they brought the material before, but this time He says, take away all of the, don't even do them any favors. Make them work very hard. Let's read. It says here, meanwhile, the Egyptian slave drivers continued to push hard. Meet your daily quota of bricks, just as you did when we provided you with straw, they demanded. Then they whipped the Israelites, foremen they had put in charge of the work crews. Why haven't you met your quotas either yesterday or today, they demanded. So the Israelite foreman went to Pharaoh and pleaded with him, please, don't treat your servants like this, they begged. We are given no straw, but the slave drivers still demand, make bricks. We are being beaten, but it isn't our fault. Your own people are to blame. But Pharaoh shouted, you are just lazy. That's why you are saying, let us go and offer sacrifices to the Lord. Now get back to work. No straw will be given to you, but you must still produce the full quota of bricks. Read it on, saints. What's the point here when you have been sent by God and you begin to act on things? Sometimes things will get tough before they get better. Sometimes things will get what? Tough before they get better. Others may question your mandate, and you may even question your godly mandate. You may even question your godly mandate. It happens. And it happened here. I am sure they went back to Moses and said, hey, Moses, you know, since you arrived here and told us about your godly mission here, human things have gotten worse. Are you sure that God sent you? You know, if He had not gone there to tell them that we must go out for 3 days, it was better before they supplied us with material. When you went and talked about this big thing that God said you must do, things have gotten worse. Are you sure? People are dying from this thing that you've said. Sometimes things may look very dark and bleak after you take the steps that God says you must take. But can I say something to you? That's not the time to give up, because it's part of the mix. Remain in faith and believe in what God has said you must do, and you must go and do. Challenges will come. I think Moses remembered God said, the heart of Pharaoh will be hard, and I'll continue. And maybe Moses also remembered that God equipped me for a variety of things. This power ought to work somewhere. So when things get tough, when you begin to do God's will and take the steps, it's not time for you to give up and disbelieve. It's time for you to what? Intensify your faith. Otherwise, you'd be different, by the way, if things didn't get tough. Do you remember how David got anointed as a king? You guys remember? In the Bible. God sent a big man, Samuel, to go and anoint David as a young guy. Actually, David won that beauty parade of all his brothers. They all came. He wasn't even there. He was looking after sheep. And at the end, Samuel says to Jesse, all your sons here. He says, no, there's some other guy who's looking after sheep. And then he comes, and God says, that's the king. And he did what? anointed him. You would expect that after anointing him, David becomes what? The king. Do you know what David still had to deal with? Take the territory. Because there was a king on the throne. And that king was still very young. He was winning battles and he was not going anywhere. But David was anointed. And so God began the process of qualifying David. He started to qualify him. You know how he qualified him? He didn't qualify him by taking him to the palace. He qualified him by taking him to go and look after sheep. And he looked after sheep, he fought a bear. He fought lions. And after acquiring that experience, David didn't just show up at the palace. He had to go and take food to an army of qualified people and find a Goliath who was big. Who was what? Big and armed and experienced. And David had to go through this training where he says, I'm a king. I'm going to deal with him today. Because God had prepared David. But this is an obstacle. He had to overcome who? Goliath. And he did not overcome Goliath by speaking the language of Goliath, of a soldier. He overcame Goliath by speaking and said, the God that I worship is going to hand you over to me today. And I'll chop off your head and I'll give it to the birds. You see, when you speak spiritual things, worldly people don't understand. He was speaking to a soldier with credentials. And his credentials were so obvious for everybody to see. He was carrying them. But David didn't descend to the level of Goliath. He remained at the level of God. And you think when he killed Goliath, he became king. No, he didn't become a king. At some point, Saul wanted to kill him. And he had an opportunity to kill Saul. But he waited for God's timing to take the throne. Now, you want everything to do what? Smooth. You don't want to pray even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. You just want to be talking valley moments all the time. And you're about to take what? Territories. So, it can get dark before there's light. The final thing that I'll say, because it'll take time. There is power that God has given you to convince powerful people in your path. Your influence and your credentials are earned through power when you're dealing with the enemy. The enemy understands what? Power. Can I repeat that? The enemy understands power. And you've got to have power. Let's look in Exodus chapter 1. I'll read very quickly. Then the Lord told Moses, now you will see what I'll do to Pharaoh. When he feels the force of my strong hand, he will let the people go. In fact, he will force them to leave his land. And God said to Moses, I am Yahweh, the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai, God Almighty. But I did not reveal my name, Yahweh, to them. And I reaffirmed my covenant with them under its terms. I promised to give them the land of Canaan where they were living as foreigners. You can be sure I have. Saints, can I say something? This whole thing here is not about Pharaoh. It's about God's promises. Some of you like fighting pharaohs instead of hanging on to the promises. Pharaoh is just by the by. I don't know how you lose the vision. When you come across a meaningless person who's just occupying a position and you forget that yours is about the promise of Abraham. When you saw the burning bush was not about Pharaoh. The burning bush was about connecting Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac and you to take people to where? To Canaan. That's why God talks about Canaan here. He's not talking about Pharaoh. So some of you miss the point. You want to fight Pharaoh instead of hanging on to the thing that will disempower you is when you begin to deal with small battles. And you forget that there is a big price. A what? A big price. Pharaoh happens to be incidental. Can I repeat that? Pharaoh happens to be what? Incidental. Oh, by the way, you know David's mission was not Goliath. Goliath happened to be what? Incidental to David becoming what? King. Some of you spend too much time and paying too much credit to Goliath instead of what? My main target is that place that Saul is sitting on. And for Moses, his main target was what? Getting people to Canaan, not Pharaoh. Powerful as he is, he's a small factor in the big plan of God. And God reminds him. God says to Moses, now Moses, I'm just going to start doing my job now. But can I just remind you, here we're not fighting Pharaoh, Moses. The reason why we're here is because we're going to Canaan. And we just need to remove this obstacle. Please don't elevate objects in the path into your mission. Can I repeat that? Don't elevate objects in your path to a mission. So it goes on. Just give me 5 more minutes and I'll be done, saints. I need to take a break and then I'll write the book and finish it. I'll write the book and finish it. I don't want to give you the entire book. Because the entire book now. You won't buy it. So he tells him. He says in verse 6, therefore say to the people, I am the Lord, I will free you from your oppression and will rescue you from slavery in Egypt. I will redeem you with a powerful arm and great acts of judgment. I will claim you as my own. You can read that up to verse 13. And then in verse 7, in chapter 7, verse 1 to 6, then the Lord said to Moses, pay close attention to this. I'll make you seem like, he says, I'll make you seem like God to Pharaoh. Watch what I'll do. Pharaoh understands power, but now I'm going to confront him with overwhelming power. You need that, saints. You must pray that God bestows you with overwhelming power so that in the eyes of the enemy and doubters, you'll seem like a God. Okay, because he's in you. Tell Aaron everything and I command you. And Aaron must command Pharaoh to let the people of Israel leave this country. There are times when then God becomes even more forceful. I like what Apostle Nokemane said. He says, you see, when you're standing this side and you pray, you don't have to see how big God becomes on the other side because it's not meant for you. It's meant for the enemy to say, yes, sis, those 2 guys came here to speak to me and they were not leaders, but man, what is confronting me here is bigger than what I saw before. So you don't know what God shows to the other side. He says, I'm going to look like a God to them when you speak. When you speak, it sounds like a command from high. And that's the power that the enemy understands.